get started. I'll share my screen, and everyone able to see my screen? You can give a thumbs up or a nod.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. My name's Kate Chesbrough, presenting on behalf of the project team for the most part, but we're here with Jeff Nadge from Barton and LaJudas. Go ahead.
Hi. How are you?
Barton and LaJudas is the project lead, Whittam Planning and Design. Working with them, we're doing a lot of the design work, working with Cloud Geshen. So we're joined by my colleagues, Ife Yan. Hi. Give a wave. And Kayla Mosbrook.
Hi.
From WPD. And a lot of the design work as well has been by Cloud Geshen. They're a design firm based in Philadelphia. So we're joined by one of their principals, Barbara Schwarzenbach, and Branson Kellen. Great. So thanks everyone again for being here tonight. It's an exciting project, and we'll just start. So Jeff, if you want to talk a bit about the structure of our project team.
Sure. Yeah, as Kate mentioned, I'm Jeff Nadge. I'm a landscape architect with Barton and LaJudas. So we're the consulting engineers. So we're doing a lot of the transportation, site, civil engineering, utility engineering. And then we've partnered with Whittam out of Ithaca. They're landscape architects, so they were heavily involved in the concept development, played kind of a critical role in getting the funding for this job. So it made a natural fit to partner with them. And then Cloud Geshen also is a partner. A lot of what you'll see was prepared by Whittam and Cloud tonight. You know, the engineering drawings are not that exciting, so you'll see the fun, colorful, vibrant stuff. But Cloud Geshen is based in Philadelphia. They provide expertise in kind of environmental branding, which includes like the identity strategies, gateway design, wayfinding, and signage. We also have on this chart Joshua Ludsky, who is the founder of Luma, is kind of a creative consultant on this for visual arts. And then Kostic did the survey, and then looking down the line, we also have a couple sub-consultants anticipated for the construction services. So this is basically the entire team.
And we wouldn't be here without the city of Binghamton. So we've got Jared Cram here as well. So the city has been, from the get-go, really a strong supporter of these ideas, and it's been a pleasure to work with them, and we're looking forward to keep them going. So this diagram here shows the general project boundary. It's an area of downtown, and as we look at some of the diagrams that talk about the DECO district funding, it's really focused on the Forum as an anchor arts institution. So this map, though, shows where we're focusing our designs within the city street rights of way on State, Washington, Henry, a bit of Water, Clinton, Lewis, and Lewis Street, and Prospect Ave. So this gives you an idea of where these ideas are focused in plan view. And as we mentioned about the Greater Binghamton Fund, a bit of background on that is that in 2018, the state announced a funding opportunity for the Greater Binghamton area specifically. And at that time, WPD helped prepare a lot of the planning documents. And as we know, many of the arts organizations in the whole Greater Binghamton area are based in downtown Binghamton. There's also a wonderful scene that has evolved over the years with restaurants and other really great initiatives that are happening downtown So we're focused around the Forum area as a major arts institution. And during that time, a lot of ideas started to float around. We developed a number of graphics that caught people's attention. We worked really closely with a lot of the project stakeholders, with the Forum and others. We had a stakeholder meeting then, and it led ultimately to a successful funding application. For this project, we are at the end of our 4-month schematic design phase. So this is an overview of where we've been since July of this year. Midway through, we had a few stakeholder workshops with the Forum again, a lot of the restaurant owners, the gallery and building owners in the district, as well as LUMA, to talk about where our ideas should go. And that was before we put out the survey for all of you to respond to. As you might have read in some of the notes, we've had a tremendous response to this survey. More than 650 people responded to this. So we're really excited to share the results of the survey, and we really thank all of you for your time in taking it. So question 1, most of the people that were taking the survey are Broome County residents. It is interesting, some of the secondary answers to the question of people's connection to the DECO district is that they work downtown or they're students in the area. The second question was about what brings people to downtown. And the most popular response there was going to restaurants, followed by running errands, making friends, meeting friends. Suppose you could make friends too. Art gallery events, and walking or running on the Riverwalk Trail. When we asked what elements we thought people would be brought to the DECO district more, the response was more outdoor events by far, followed by more green space and more features for adults as opposed to features for teens or kids. So those were some of the top responses there, as well as more businesses or residences downtown in the area. When we asked about what art elements of downtown people enjoy in and around the district, the most popular answer was public art, followed by First Friday Art Walks and LUMA. That happens every year. As another set of popular answers were theater and philharmonic events, again at the Forum, and art galleries. When we asked about riding bikes, it looks like most people are riding their bikes about once a year in the district, but we heard from people later in some of the more open-ended surveys that sound like they are the monthly or weekly bike riders. So this was an interesting conversation to have, as well as what features would improve the bike riding experience. So bike lanes and more connections to the Riverwalk were the popular answers there. As we're currently undergoing and experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted to ask what features people have enjoyed, or in terms of responses, creative responses to the pandemic, and what we should think about including in the design. So answers to that included more outdoor seating for restaurants and more outdoor programming for art events, exercise, food, and so on. There have been some pretty interesting responses to that outdoor seating outside of the Lost Dog Cafe and others in the area. Question 8 was open-ended. We asked what elements that are currently in the DECO district today that people think should be highlighted in the design. So by far, the most popular answer here was public art in the district, followed by art galleries, the architecture of the area, and historic buildings. They're pretty related. And some third tier answers in terms of popularity were lighting, local organizations or artists and artisans, and restaurants. Among the following elements, we asked respondents to select 5 that they felt that the district should embody. It was a ranking question. So the most popular answers here were more plantings, green space and trees, outdoor seating and sculptural furnishings, strong visual presence of improvements, public spaces, lighting, public art, walkability, and streetscape elements and other outdoor elements. I should say that just as a general note, tonight we will be going through the survey, and then we'll be looking at the schematic design, and you'll see how what we're hearing in this and what we've designed to date are related. So more to come. Out of the DECO district signage strategies below, we asked people to indicate their favorites. People were preferring these cut metal options. For gateway bridge elements, people liked the lit up bridge as opposed to a painted bridge. In terms of the bridge in question, there is more of the thinking about the railroad bridge that goes over State Street as you leave or enter the district, by the way. Out of the place branding lighting that was shown, people liked these really colorful overhead elements. Either the light or the features themselves were different colors in these options. There were a few different uniquely branded strategies shown, and people liked these fence panels that were either a chromatic expression or a more neutral tone, but a custom cut and designed infill panels in fences. Thinking about what crosswalk art people preferred, they liked most those that have the stripe the white stripe that looks like a typical crosswalk, but painting in between with different colors. They also liked these that are more of a curb bump out, but painted on with the crosswalk just black and white in between. Furnishing strategies that people liked were these are both wood, so people were definitely preferring the wood look and texture. This one looks almost like a pop-up installation. It has some color as well. It all looks comfortable, and this is a more curvilinear pattern that people liked. Out of the green infrastructure options, these are green infrastructure plantings that help absorb stormwater during rain events. The preference was toward more of a general green palette with maybe some pops of color as shown here, but in general, just more of a cohesive greens as a color tone for that. When we asked about what street tree and storm grates people liked, these are very different, but both the most popular. So this is a Corten steel look. They're both custom made and interesting, but this is a much more colorful look. Out of the traffic calming crosswalk strategies, the most popular answer by far was this one that has some specialty paving and plantings at the crosswalk. And these were almost a tie, but the second most popular had a custom painted strategy. Out of the specialty paving strategies shown, people liked the gray gradient with rectilinear pavers, almost like a larger brick. Again, these were almost a tie, but the second most popular was more of an organic shape that is like a hexagonal, again, in a tone of gray. So then we had our most open-ended question by far, question 20, which asked, what else should we be thinking about for the DECO district? So this was our, I'll share sort of our process. Our first response was to put together this word cloud. So we were seeing a lot of comments about more greenery and trees, public art, accessibility. But as we started to read these really thoughtful responses that, again, were in the hundreds, really reading through them, there was so much richness and diversity in what people were saying. So we picked a few out of the hat, but Dancing, lighting, or water during the summer seemed like a really beautiful idea. And these just really got us thinking, lighting up building and bridge facades. Downtown not being only for younger people, but thinking about older people as well. The importance of calming traffic and protected bike lanes. There were a number of ideas about considering limiting traffic on Sundays, for example, or other limited periods of time, and allowing the streets to be closed during an event. Thinking about native trees and shrubs. So there were so many of these that we really wanted to show the diversity of responses here. So these are ordered in terms of how many times they were brought up. Many comments brought a couple ideas up, so we did our best to group these. So the number one comment was about maintenance, but it was about a lot of different elements of maintenance. So picking a few out, thinking about salt and winter, looking at pavers instead of paint, potentially, thinking about long-term costs. And as you might imagine, during a public outreach period, we heard some ideas that don't necessarily agree with each other, but it is our job and responsibility as designers to balance all of these ideas. So going through these, the most commonly talked about thing was maintenance. We heard a lot about the overall aesthetic, a number of different ideas about whether or not to use color, what types of color, what types of style, public art, and ideas about what that can be. Accessibility of all kinds, so for all ages, all mobility abilities, pets, wheelchairs, roller skates, so on. Plantings and green space, painted streets. There was a split decision in some cases on that. Thinking about artists, especially local, diverse, getting artists involved in the design. Lighting in the district and its importance in the aesthetics as well as the safety. Sustainability, thinking about native plants, sustainable materials, green infrastructure, thinking about events in the district, dancing, music, performances, food trucks, and keeping events year-round. Safety in the district, so monitoring, lighting, again, places to gather, thinking about how families can feel safe here. Parking was brought up in terms of its accessibility, its cost, connections to galleries, and its relationship with wayfinding. Walkability in the district, diversity of how we represent everyone in the district and how people are feeling included in this district. The river, thinking about the connection to the riverfront, Riverwalk, closing off streets to cars, again, biking, a couple ideas about garbage and how to manage that, benches, a lot of thoughts about college students, good and bad. And places around the world that were mentioned. I mean, a lot of design precedents that were mentioned here. And so there were just so many responses, and it was really wonderful to hear from everyone and to continue to learn about what's important to this community in downtown and beyond, and how that can make its way into the design as we continue to move forward with the design. So we'll transition now to sharing where we are in terms of the design process. One thing as we began thinking that really struck us was about the history of the canal that used to be on State Street, and thinking about infrastructure and water and health, and how do we think about those elements in the 21st century now, and how do we think about infrastructure. So you'll see this idea of the canal pop up a few times as we talk about State Street moving forward. A little bit more about that. There used to be a canal on State Street that was later filled. So a lot of history there. So we put together a master plan for the area I'll zoom in a little bit so it's a little bit easier to read. And this plan, by the way, will come up a few times. So just to orient everyone, the State Street garage is here where my mouse is. The Water Street garage is here. And one of our primary gateways is the State and Henry Street intersection. Moving along State Street, go there in a minute. On Henry Street, we're going toward the Riverwalk. Riverwalk is here. And as we move up on Washington and State Street, we see the Forum near the center, Clinton Street, the Clinton Street Bridge, Lewis Street, how that connects to Prospect Ave, which is actually there. So the next several slides will dive into the details of these plans. And we'll start from the ground up. So one of the fundamental things we're thinking about are creating more public space in the district. And we can do that by widening sidewalks and adding sidewalks within the street rights of way. So that strategy is very much employed on the State Street and Washington Street corridors. And there's a new sidewalk added on Prospect Ave. All of this allows for all of the many uses that public space can have and really enhances walkability throughout the district. So we can imagine, events like First Friday and many others would be just much enhanced by having more outdoor space. Thinking about the gateways themselves and the curb bump outs there, as well as the painted crosswalks. Curb bump outs help to calm traffic and they announce that you've arrived to the district. So we're narrowing the street at those intersections where we can. And then for the crosswalks, we're painting in between the lines with a color palette that will be cohesive throughout the district. And so these really artful elements will really tell you that you've arrived to this place. Thinking about traffic calming even more, we have two mid-block crossings that are raised curbs, raised crossings so there will be a slight bump as a car goes along, which really reinforces the idea of slowing down. But for pedestrians, it'll be at the same elevation as the sidewalk. So the crossing itself will feel more like a plaza to get you from one side of the street to the other. We are visually narrowing the streets by adding paint to the streets, like these images. So this paint, the paint for the visual narrowing of the streets for traffic calming, as well as for the crossing, the crosswalks, will be a really durable, outdoor rated type of paint that will last for years. And then when it needs to be touched up, it can be touched up. And thinking about some special paving at the curb bump outs near the mid-block crossings. There are a number of strategies for public plantings, the most significant of which are new street trees in the district. During one of our first site visits, we were sort of joking as landscape architects, oh, there's only about 10 trees in this district. And then we counted, and there are only about 10 trees in the district. So this design calls for a diversity of tree species. So in the case that any blight might happen, that it doesn't knock out all of the trees. It's a really good way to think about the ecology of the city. So we have these canopy trees that are shown here. And then we have smaller trees where there are overhead wires or in between that are more ornamental, and some, like hawthorn, retain their berries and look really nice during the winter time. And we have shrubs and flowers and other perennials as well in some spaces. For the tree grates on State Street, for those same street trees, we're thinking about this water pattern that visually recalls the idea of the canal on State Street and also really celebrates the idea of infrastructure. Another way we're doing that, and we're still figuring out the exact locations of the green infrastructure, but on the State Street corridor in particular, we're thinking about how we can do green infrastructure plantings that will, again, help with stormwater, bring a lot of green and visual interest throughout the year. Plantings between cars and the pedestrian areas helps with safety. And we've got a number of species that look good throughout the year and again relate to the color palette. So we've got oranges and purples as well as greens to really have a cohesive palette. One more point on this, we also have some green infrastructure on Henry Street here as well as Prospect Ave and going down toward the railroad tracks. Movable planters are a strategy that are they're easy to do. We've seen some already in the district. As seen here, they can be on casters, so they can be moved in place for when we need them. We're really thinking about restaurant owners, building owners, gallery owners as potential sponsors of these, so that there's this network of movable planters so they can be moved out, maybe claim a parking space or two for an event, and then moved back in during winter or when that event has passed. Thinking about wood or metal for those materials. Furnishings in the district, they're so small in the plans, so these are blow-ups, but the outdoor benches are focused on the southern side of this segment of Washington Street near the Forum entrance and the intersection with Henry Street, as well as the State Street area in the middle of the street and the north side. So these benches are the same product that's being used on the Washington Street Mall that's being redesigned and will be constructed soon. So that helps lend a cohesive furnishing palette with the rest of downtown. And it comes in these really hot, beautiful colors, and it has a lot of different ways we can configure them so that there are backrests or armrests that are comfortable, and we can use these angles to put them together, which creates nice little pockets for conversation. Thinking about bike racks and waste receptacles, we will have a share row on both sides of the street on Henry Street to connect to the Riverwalk. And we'll have, we're planning for bike racks at Washington and State Street there. Again, these relate to the benches. And there will be waste receptacles throughout the district to help with maintenance and other concerns. So that's kind of building this from the ground up from a public space and more landscape perspective. And I'll hand it off to Cloud Geshen to talk about some of the branding and other elements in the design. Oh, I have to unmute you. Please hold. Okay. Branson, are you able to unmute yourself? I just asked you to unmute.
I think so.
Okay, great.
Do I have audio? Okay,
yep.
Thanks. So anyway, to sort of give an introduction to kind of the discussion of brand and branding for the district. When we sort of began exploring, what a brand for this district might look like, we were initially inspired by the history of arts in the area, which sort of this rich history of visual art, as well as theater and these art festivals like Luma, and how the people in the local community are kind of what's animating the district. We're also thinking about the evolution of this neighborhood sort of over time and the history of this kind of particular part of Binghamton, the history of the canal and the history of industry here. And then sort of looking at how that translates to a logo, we started with sort of a simple geometric font that you can see in the upper left-hand corner. and began to sort of vary the size of letters to try and reinforce the pronunciation of DECO, so it wasn't kind of mispronounced or referred to as DECO or something that it's not supposed to be. But this varying of the size of the letters also gives kind of a theatrical character to a logo, almost like individual people performing on a stage, and kind of giving each letter kind of its own life. On the right, we're showing the logo with sort of a dot pattern applied to it. And this pattern we think is kind of a reference to people in the district coming together and kind of creating this art and culture. So it's, it's not about kind of this, it's more about kind of individuals coming together to create community. On the bottom, we started to think about also how major streets in the district could sort of become part of the brand in a way. And the street names, we're showing Water in Washington State. These sort of speak to the history of Binghamton, but also start to place the district sort of within the overall fabric of the city. Here's some more examples of pattern being applied to the logo, and I think this speaks to sort of the flexibility of this idea that individual people or kind of various cultural events are coming together to sort of create what is the identity of the DECO district. So this could kind of be implemented in a lot of ways. And speaking about brand, we're also speaking about how the DECO brand would exist in sort of the physical environment. So we started to think about what colors or materials could be used in things like signage or some other elements that we'll show today to kind of bring the brand to sort of the physical world. And in sort of the top row, you can see we're relying on sort of this deep, neutral color, kind of like a brown, almost black, which is kind of representative, we think, of the industrial character and kind of the history of the neighborhood. There's a lot of brick buildings, and the railroad bridge is sort of this brown, kind of beautiful, aged color. And then in terms of material, again, that industrial character kind of lends itself to more metal or things that could be used almost like sculpture. Also in this top row, we're showing some kind of these accent colors, which are a little brighter, and we're thinking of using those in kind of a more strategic way as a complement to the neutral color. Then also thinking about how kind of all of this is interacting with the planting and landscape scheme that Kate kind of just went through. Moving into signage a little more specifically within the district, we first identified some goals. And sort of our list of goals here was to first orient kind of pedestrian visitors, but also tell them that they've kind of arrived at the DECO district. So identify the district at the periphery, and then also begin to direct people to sort of internal and external destinations like Forum Theater or public parking garages. The bus station was a really important thing that came up. But also these external destinations, so you start to understand maybe not a boundary, but kind of the relationship between something like the DECO district and the Greenway and access to that, or maybe the sort of district around the courthouse. What we ultimately, I think, settled on was kind of a simple system of directional signage that could be implemented on existing light posts or also installed on new posts. The design of this is something that, again, is kind of largely neutral, but readable. And then this arrow feature is kind of speaking to the identity of the district and kind of the patterns we showed before. So the arrow is sort of like the feature that's connecting or tying it together and tying it to the identity. But the kind of system of signage as a whole is largely functional and simple. On the left, you can see some of the locations that we identified, mostly on the periphery of the district, where we think that directional signage should be placed. And sort of within the structure of what we showed on the previous page, the signage could take on kind of a variety of forms. It could be sort of more sculptural and curvy, like a number 1, or possibly a little simpler and geometric, like number 3. So within kind of that functional structure that we outlined on the previous page, it could kind of take on a variety of different forms that we're still exploring. we're also thinking about how we can identify parking in maybe an elevated way. So kind of what you're seeing here on the right is a larger graphic that could be applied to the parking structure on State Street, which is continuing the design language of the other signage. Here's what that might look like in person. So you're identifying the garage itself, but also directing towards its entrance in kind of a larger way that speaks to both vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Moving into what we call gateway elements. And what we mean by gateway is that something that lets the visitor know that they've sort of arrived in this district in maybe a more elevated way. And what we're showing here is sort of a fairly tall sculptural piece displaying the street name as well as carrying the DECO name in a slightly more subdued way. And we're thinking something like this would be constructed out of metal with, again, some sort of colorful accent like you can see in some of the example imagery on the right. On the left, you can see some locations we identified, again, similar to what we did with the signage. Some of the particular intersections are State and Henry, as well as Clinton and Water Street. And on the right, you can see some more examples of the variety that these could sort of take on. They could be a little more curvy, or sculptural, like a number 1 or number 2, or perhaps be a little more geometric. But again, these are sort of these larger, more sculptural pieces that are announcing your entrance into a district. We're also thinking about some smaller elements which could maybe complement the gateway pieces that we just showed, and we're calling these sort of screen elements. And these are things that are sort of varying in scale, although smaller than the gateways. And these could carry a variety of messages. They could say, welcome, or welcome to DECO, or could continue kind of the street name language. And again, sort of we highlighted some locations, particularly the beginning and end of State Street. And on the right, you're seeing actually the existing median at State and Henry, and sort of an implementation within the median there, which in our opinion is sort of an underutilized space where some of these more interesting sculptural elements could go. And a few different strategies of how that could be implemented. They could sort of be organic and playful, or they could become more geometric. But it's all about kind of creating this gateway experience of, if you're driving past something like this, it's something that could catch your attention pretty easily. Within signage, we're also thinking about banners. There's a lot of existing streetlights on State Street in particular that could carry like some kind of a changeable banner. So you could put up these kind of colorful, eye-catching banners to let people know that they've kind of entered this part of town. These could also be geared towards events or something like that, but we're just kind of carrying the design language through to all of these different kinds of pieces. Sort of the final component, I guess, that we were thinking about when it comes to brand and signage is lighting. We touched on this earlier, but I guess we're going to circle back to it now. We thought about a few different kinds of light fixtures that we could locate within the district. A few standalone, which you can see in kind of the singular red dots, and then some overhead catenary lighting within central spaces, like across the street from the Forum, or kind of within the central space on State Street. And these standalone fixtures are what's referred to as gobo fixtures, which are essentially a focusable light fixture that can carry pattern and image. So you're seeing this particular fixture sort of casting this light down, but also displaying the DECO name, or it could be a little more ambient. It could just kind of be a pattern like water. There's some kind of example images on the left that give you kind of a greater idea. This could be colorful or kind of these ambient patterns. But what's kind of interesting about this is that you have the ability to change the image periodically. So if the city, for instance, wanted to display a particular graphic during a specific time of year, you could change out the sort of image piece of these while the fixture stays in place. This could also be something that local artists participate in if they become engaged, and they could create custom graphics for these things that could begin to animate the street. and then the catenary overhead lighting that I was referring to earlier, kind of in concert with these other fixtures. We're showing here the Forum Theater on Washington, so these fixtures could be kind of suspended over the street and really begin to animate the space at night. This is great for a variety of reasons, like safety. It could potentially make this safer, but it also is creating this sort of sense of public space, and that this area is really for everyone.
So that was a lot of information that we just shared, but we, again, thought it was wonderful to see how there are parallels between what we're hearing from the public as well as how our design thinking has evolved to date. As we've said, it will continue to evolve as we work with the city and continue to think about what we're hearing. We've really thought about this environment as a whole. So many of the strategies that you saw tonight are at a large scale and at a small scale, but as a whole, they aggregate to a unified, cohesive, readily identifiable, unique district that is connected to the rest of downtown. So we hope that this becomes a really wonderful part of downtown Binghamton, and are really looking forward to keeping going with our design process. So with that, I think we'll open up the chat and start to have a conversation. Where's my chat? Bear with me just a sec. Ife or Kayla, if you have a tip I should be following. Ask my colleagues. There it is. Okay, here's the chat. Okay, so that everyone knows, the recording will be made available to the general public. It will be posted on the city's website. And I think I'll unmute participants, and if we can, just have a conversation about this. So I'm going to ask everyone to unmute themselves. I'm just going to go down the list. And if you are at your computer and have a video that we can see you, that's even better. But if not, no worries. There is one question in the chat that asks us to talk a little bit more about the experience in front of the forum. So I'll zoom into that area in the plan. So this has curb bump outs on either side of Washington Street. And it allows for drop-off zone in front of the theater so that people are still able to be dropped off, but it creates more of a plaza near the historic, stylized marquee that the forum has. So there's seating there, there's catenary lighting in front, and there's ornamental trees across the street. Maybe before we move into a whole group discussion, we could talk a little bit more about next steps so that it's clear where we're going from here. I might have jumped the gun a little bit.
Kate?
Yeah.
I had a question regarding the State Street garage. It's definitely a neo-Stalinist, brutalist structure on its best day. That's when the sun's out. But, you know, just putting the sign on it, it just seems like a little bit, you know, if we can put some lipstick on that, as I think my chat thing item had, is that pretty it up a little bit. And hopefully it'd be something that could be detached. So in the next garage that replaces it in the probably not too distant future. So if it's a great piece of art, we're not going to lose it for posterity, but that's something that could be attached in that process. Any thoughts?
Our thought basically was to focus on the streetscape outside of it, because we know that that might change, as you alluded to. There's no definite timeline for when that will be. We just wanted to do what we thought was the priority of making it really obvious where to park to go to galleries and the forum.
The one thing I thought though is an opportunity, if you were going to put some like, I'm not talking about painting on it, but if you had some kind of, you know, you could drill into it, some kind of, you know, metal sculpture or something, even something kinetic, that would be of interest visually, but that could be attached to the next garage or whatever structure gets located there. But just,
I think it's a great idea.
Ugly building that,
Yeah.
I got a hating for it.
We think that's a great idea. I mean, it's really similar to some of the things we were talking about early on. So we'll keep thinking about this.
And I take it, did the lateral park went away, I take it? From the one that was going to connect from State Street over to the Washington?
Bob Crow parcel, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is still privately owned. So it's not part of our scope. But as you know, during the Greater Binghamton Fund application, we were well aware of the potential for that.
And then the one other thing is the cartographer in me, I think it says Clinton Street on there, and that's actually East Clinton Street. Just.
Oh, good eye. The Bob Crow parcel is basically on hold, and the Clinton Street is mislabeled. So good.
East Clinton, yep.
Yep. Thanks.
Don't worry, they made the same mistake on the Clinton Street side. They named that East Clinton Street. Not you guys, somebody else, another project. A common mistake.
While we're kind of getting started in our conversation, I thought it might help give everyone some context to have an overview of the next steps. So Jeff, if you want to speak to these.
Yeah, sure. So as Kate mentioned, you know, we're under contract as a team for 30% completion right now. And that is to help us and the city kind of better define what we take into final design, and then utilizing some of the public input. We'll work with the city next to kind of identify and prioritize some of the improvements and align it with the available funding, and then and probably coordinate it with a couple other projects the city has that they'd like to get going next year. So following this portion of the project, we'll be going into the final design over the winter, late fall and winter, anticipating starting construction next summer with a couple other city projects. So we'll be working with the city next on kind of sorting out what will be going into final design with and what we're looking at construction with. There's a couple initiatives around the district right now that we're working with. They do have a State Street reconstruction project going on, so that's going to be coordinated with that. And then there was an RFP out for the Water Street garage, so that may go eventually. So we're kind of anticipating certain things, you know, in that parcel, as well as, you know, I think we're designing the Washington State to anticipate that, you know, Bob Kroll parcel does become a public space eventually. So, but that is the kind of the long-term schedule right now. So we're looking to go to construction next year.
Okay. We've had a couple more. Thanks for that overview, Jeff.
Yep.
Had a couple more comments come up in the chat. So the first is about thoughts on extending down Henry Street to the bus station to entice visitors. So it is a good, it was frankly a little bit hard to color within the lines as designers for this project, but the city is aware that, there's no real boundary, and we're aware of that as well too. So we can only plan on these other improvements to the streets. Henry Street, as an example, will just continue to be improved, and it'll all tie in together. But basically, we had to start somewhere, and we do have a budget to work within. So we are hoping that the gateway elements and the wayfinding at that intersection will make it more apparent that the bus station is here. And also these improvements, including this new crosswalk from Prospect Ave, will make it easier for people that are walking from State Street, Lewis Street to cross and go to the bus station.
Kate, one of the things that was out there, and I remember talking to the owner of the parking lot. If you go straight from the bus station, you come off the buses, there's a parking lot. I know the owner of that parking lot was willing to allow that a pathway be painted on it. It would be a very small budget item. And then that would draw people through the parking lot with Chris's Diner and Brunelli's Gallery and draw them in there. And there's also some thoughts about putting murals on both the side of the Brunelli's building and on the side of the Chris's Diner. And that would and then with the signage that would draw people from the bus station into it, rather, because other than that, you're putting them on Henry Street, which is not the scenic zone of the city of Binghamton. So if you could draw them straight into it, but there was, I think that was part of the original design. I don't know where it went, but it just seems it's an inexpensive way of doing it. And I know the owner of the parking lot was very willing as a supporter of the arts. It's Tom, the owner of Atomic Tom's.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to continue coordinating with a lot of private owners. But
if I can help, I did a lot of footwork on that. So if I can help, don't be shy.
All right. And the idea about the murals, there is a parallel effort that the county is doing right now for all the murals that are funded by the Greater Binghamton Fund. And that's all three municipalities, Binghamton, Johnson City, Endicott. But the speaking from what I understand the county's done so far is have a call for private owners to express their interest in having a mural on their property. I'm not totally sure of the status of that.
I would strongly encourage, I don't know what the contact has been there, but that's a great place to do it, and you'd be drawing people into the art district.
Yep.
Highly encourage anyone to talk directly to the county about the murals. But as we've been talking with them, Stephanie and others, we know that these will work in concert with each other, and the murals are really going to help set the tone for this area.
Also, everyone mentioned that Instagrammable moments, and we were thinking like this public art outreach program of murals in the designs for the crosswalks or the bump outs would be opportunities. But those murals can become those opportunities that people stop and take their picture in.
I'm also pretty sure Brunelli has funding in place for his own project for a mural. That's
I know he had an application. I don't know where that is, and
I'm
I
not.
say that,
Yeah. Go ahead, Stephanie. Yeah.
County. There is some funding slated for, I believe it's 186 State Street, and we're working with the property owner. We have to work out a lot of details, but that is definitely a location for a potential mural given everything works out. And we also had probably a few other interested property owners right in the DECO district, a couple on State Street and Prospect Ave. So we're trying to finalize some of those details and really solidify the interest. But yep, this area will be a concentration of public art through our project and, you know, through the city of Binghamton's efforts as well. They'll mend very well.
Yeah, it's great that you're all coordinating that. Wonderful.
The other thing I wanted to mention was that this is a kit of parts, like the movable planters, the wayfinding, the gateway elements, so that once the funding becomes available, they can be implemented in other areas to create a more cohesive district.
Right.
How bike friendly is this going to be? Are there going to be, you know, racks and bike lanes?
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's some racks in there. I think they're
on Washington and State. Yeah.
So yeah, Henry Street, we're looking at adding, it's kind of a shared use symbol. It's called a Shero. No dedicated bike lane, but given the width and some of the parking short blocks, the traffic's already pretty calm. It's kind of a direct connection right to the Greenway.
Jeff, I can tell you from I have witnesses that I'm probably one of the biggest bike rider around, even though I don't look like it. It's fair to say those shared lanes are very poorly understood by most humanoids. Yeah. Especially when they're driving cars, and especially when there's you know, if there's snow that's pushing you out, or ice, or a uneven you know, sewer entrance kind of thing, that it's a little sporty, or more sporty than I generally you know, I wouldn't want my kids to be doing it. I do it myself because I have a death wish, but you know, I think those shared use things, and there's one right now on what is it, on State Street right by City Hall, and it makes zero sense to me. And you know, it's somebody who's never ridden a bicycle in downtown Binghamton.
Yeah, I mean, they're not appropriate everywhere. I mean, if we have adequate width, especially with parking and some street trees and some short blocks, it really tends to slow some things down. So we don't think there's a lot of traffic, you know, and high speeds between something like State and Washington, or Washington and Water. So it's pretty calm there.
The only thing is, when if you're going to have people biking at night with the bars open and people driving, that I'm just you're designing to a scenario that doesn't exist.
I mean, if we wanted to explore maybe dedicated bike lanes, we'd probably have to remove parking. So it's always a balance between, you know, if parking is important on Henry, there is some spaces we're retaining there. Clinton Street's a little more of a difficult situation, just because that is kind of it's a high volume intersection, so there really is no room to add anything, but there is a bike lane that heads east, so we're going to keep that. That would connect the Greenway heading east into the district. But
another element of this in terms of multimodal is that there is a direct connection from the Riverwalk, short little on-street section, and then you're at the bus station. So if you do rely on public transportation, we thought that was a pretty convenient connection there. And truth be told, a lot of this design is hopefully going to build new habits of drivers, walkers, everybody. So apologies, a second ago, everyone had to see my messy computer screen, but I wanted to get a higher resolution drawing so we could do these zoom ins.
No judgment, no judgment. You should see mine.
Let's see. There was a question in the chat about why DECO. It's a really great question, actually. The name DECO is an acronym that stands for the Downtown Entertainment and Cultural Organizations District. That doesn't exactly roll off the tongue by itself. So DECO we thought was a punchy name. However, as you can see in some of the branding that Barb and Branson were presenting, DECO is sort of an underbrand to the street name itself or the overall area itself. So we did make the choice to not let that overshadow anything. It's there, it's almost like it's there if you want it to be there, but the names of the streets and the place itself are the priority. It's also why we've been in our public outreach efforts calling this the Downtown Binghamton Arts District. We know it's not the only place in downtown where there is arts. There's, I mean, the No Theater, there's Washington Street south of the Metro Center, Court Street area. There's the whole spread of downtown, but that's a little bit about the name and the brand. So it's DECO, and it's there, and it has a uniqueness about it, but it's not front and center. Hopefully that's clear. Again, if you have any colleagues or friends, anyone you know that might have been interested in coming tonight and isn't here, or you know, even to look at these survey results, there's a lot of things that were brought up that it was a really rich dialogue that people were having. So this will be posted publicly, and also if there are questions as you think of things, you can reach out to me at WPD. So it's two complicated last names in a row. It's my last name, Chesborough at whittamdesign.com. It's my email address. So feel free to share that or to reach out if there are any questions. I'll just go back to the plan. All right.
Can't see up at the top.
The railroad is at the very top.
No, I think there's some trees along there that we can't really see. Oh, that is the top.
Do I hear people talking about an area they want to be zoomed in on?
Would you mind zooming in on Prospect Ave?
Sure.
We have a real traffic rodeo going on up there now.
So on Prospect Ave, there's a really wide street right of way between, and as we know, Prospect Ave, as we know today, Prospect Ave is, there's no sidewalk there, and there is, like you said, a bit of a rodeo in terms of traffic. So what's proposed here is a new sidewalk that will continue to allow Firestone to park their customers in front. You'd have to, it'll be a mountable curb, but a new sidewalk will go all the way to the end of the street. Tree plantings will be of an appropriate height underneath the overhead wires. And these are all green infrastructure elements. So they'll soak up the water that pools in this area. And there's on-street parking both for Firestone and for 61 Prospect. So it's more defined in this plan than it is today.
Good.
Thank you.
On the other side of the street, just to recall some of the things we heard in the survey about the lighting in the bridge. So we have an active railroad line on this end of the DECO district. So we're calling for lighting that will light up the underside of the bridge. So that industrial character will be, I mean, it's actually quite beautiful today, but it'll be highlighted, and you'll have these really contemporary light fixtures that highlight that as a true gateway for that area. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about Lewis Street as yet. This calls for supplementing some of the existing plantings that are there, visually narrowing the street with paint to help calm some of the traffic. Each of these gateway areas, again, have the painted intersections. As we come to Clinton Street, there's that GoBo special lighting fixture at this intersection. A gateway feature that Branson showed that are, these 14-foot tall pieces right when you get off of the Clinton Street Bridge. Wayfinding signage on the back of the church.
Just to echo kind of what Bob was saying, I think those are great improvements for Prospect Ave up there, but I think a continuation of those would be much welcome, south where, across from the bus station, right in that area, there's no sidewalk and it's just a pretty much open driveway for that parking lot. And I think it would just be great, maybe not through this project, but to keep in mind to put that on the record.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a really cheap add-on, and you'd have a property owner who's very open to it.
Yep.
And it would draw people in. Strangers who are coming off a bus who don't know Binghamton from Peoria would be able to be drawn into the DECO district that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this project does help us plan for other city projects in the future. So it is, you're right, that connection is pretty clear as you think long term.
And while Stephanie's here, it might be a good thing to embed on the back of the forum, like the little signage of like DECO, district, so people see it. They come off the bus, they'll see DECO, on the back of the forum, which is very visible from the garage. And there's a pathway inside the garage facility, the intermodal facility, that points you right to it, but then it just dumps you off on Prospect Street. So if you're familiar, if you've been there, it's it's screaming to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And not doing it puts people in Binghamton and intermodal in a not particularly friendly spot.
These are good points.
I think just another thing to consider, you mentioned, creating more public space, more gathering space, just making sure those spaces are equipped with, whether it's electric or, other infrastructure to allow, maybe food trucks or, a small musical performance or something like that.
That's
Stephanie,
that's a great point, because the lighting on State Street, where we did the first year of Luma, it's very low amperage, and that bottom line, if you're going to be opening the street, and I think that's being opened up, I would get a much more robust electrical system in there. I'm glad Stephanie said that. That's why she's a planner, as far as it goes, because that really was a real limitation in being able to put on events there. Even with Luma, you put in like a popcorn popper. The element that it would heat the oil would blow the fuse.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and as we think about these lighting fixtures that Cloud and team have put together, we will absolutely be confronting voltage in the area. So we'll have to wrap this all in. Yep. Good points. And you're right. It can be as simple as the ability to plug in, and then the community just takes care of the rest. And that kind of sentiment about community events and we're hoping to basically set the stage for more and more to happen in the district, more public art initiatives that private owners might take on their own, window displays and so on. People are already doing so much good work in the area. We just hope that this really helps promote people to come to the area, spend time, and keep this area healthy, vibrant, and growing in the creative ways that it does.
So Kate, you have a question about follow-up meetings?
Yes, we do. So any follow-up meetings will be announced as we move into the next stages of design. We don't have any dates as of yet. We will need to do some coordination with building owners in particular as we're talking kind of nuts and bolts, but the general public will be continuing. You'll keep hearing updates about this as we move forward, and you'll be able to reach out to us. Just don't know the details yet.
Mhm.
Or the format that'll take. You know, we're all on Zoom, and this Zoom universe barely existed before early this year. And just speaking of the pandemic, it really has highlighted the importance of public space, not only in Binghamton, but everywhere. It's really been a savior for all of us to be able to go outside and enjoy our cities and our local community. So I think we're going to keep the meeting open for a little bit longer, but I think we've covered most of the material that we had for tonight. Again, these will be posted. You can send them to your networks, and hopefully the survey results and these designs to date help inspire and inform everyone about what this project is doing, as well as what others might be able to do as well.
Hey, quick, has BMTS, like on the bike side of that, have they been looped in?
Not yet on the bike side. We've coordinated with them on the bus routes right now.
It might be a good idea. They've had some good ideas as far as bike paths and
Yeah.
that are actually functional. I'm not, just so you know, I'm not a really big fan of the way it's being presented on the bike
Yeah,
side.
I mean-
and if you want to make it so that it becomes a more, walkable, rideable, city, instead of just being the 50s, we want to get out of the 50s and get into the, at least maybe the
Right.
20s, single digits, kind of thing. So how do we get there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the only thing we've looked at with the BMTS is their actual route map right now.
Mhm, mhm.
So there are a
I'd
lot of
be glad
streets.
to volunteer and bring my
Yeah.
bike and do
There's a
whatever I
lot of
need to
streets
do.
on that map I wouldn't ride, but there's always a debate on, some cyclists feel more comfortable moving with traffic and using the street lights and following, the traffic laws, and there's some that like a separated system, but some folks think that makes people feel too safe. I mean, I like dedicated lanes myself, at least.
Do you ride a bike often in the city?
Not in the city, no.
Okay, so then don't,
Yeah.
they're not good. They do
I've
not
heard
work well.
both sides, yeah.
I know, but I just tell you, I've had engineers tell me that all the time because they're trying to save space on the road.
Yeah.
But at some point, you got to make a decision. And if you're going to just exclude bicycles, just exclude them. But if you're going to say you're going to do something, it's even putting people in a more dangerous situation
Yeah.
than if you just left them to their own devices. Because
Yeah.
people
those-
do not obey them.
For those that don't know, what does BMTS stand for?
Oh, I think it's Binghamton Metropolitan Transit Study,
It's their local MPO. That's, yeah.
something like that. I'm close if I'm not there.
Yeah, I mean, this is not, I mean, if there was some additional transportation funding, I mean, this is more of a streetscape enhancement and pedestrianization project. So,
Well, bicyclists are people too.
yeah, I know we're doing what we can to at least link up to the Greenway.
Yeah. That was,
As far as a separate facility inside the, the right of way that we have to work with, that would be difficult.
Well, that's why engineers get the big money. Just
Yeah.
think the big thoughts. Madre
I know that
Dio.
Jeff and Kate early on looked at one-way streets and tractor trailers and all of that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much traffic volume going through here. We looked at maybe one way, or actually even closing down Washington between Henry and Clinton. It's just a pedestrian zone. But there's so much traffic, at least trying to access court between front and, there are a lot of parking areas in this district. So, but, like I said, there's short blocks. They are moving relatively slow. Hopefully some of these mid-block raised crosswalks will even slow people down more.
Yeah.
Kate
And
and Jeff, can I just stick my oar in for a second
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Scott.
and support Bob in looking at, maybe just quickly looking at a bike lens with this as well. I think it's an important piece that we've talked about,
Yeah.
but it might bear revisit. And Bob, good to see you. Thanks for your comment.
Oh, no. So I apologize as well.
No. I
they're
think
helpful.
as someone who
Yeah.
tries to ride my bike in a city to work every day, I really think it's an important way to look at the space, and I think that it bears some thought. So thanks for those comments.
No, thank you.
You mentioned public art. There were some screens or pieces of art we were thinking of going down State Street towards the bridge, replacing those panels. And then at the end of, is this Clinton? No, that's Clinton over here. Prospect, and up here at the end at the railway station where there's a little green area. Whether we could contact the railroad and have that as a public art piece too on that fence. It's just something we all need to look into more.
That's a great idea. That's an excellent idea. Because I did a lot of that in the Syracuse by the railroad crossings up in Syracuse, and it looks good. It got a lot of positive attention along the way for that as a gateway to that, and I can't remember the name of that district. But
Yeah, it's the West End over there. It took about a year to get the railroad to agree to paint those bridges, but I think they commissioned artists for each side there.
Mm-hmm. I know. I know the New York Susquehanna and Western is a different crossing. Norfolk Southern is not as friendly. The NYS&W was very open to painting on the east side of town.
Yeah, CSX won't really even talk to you usually. Were there any preferences on the variations of the signage or gateway elements, like kind of the style or architectural configurations of them? I mean, I think there was a few options.
And we still have a number of people here in the meeting. We haven't heard from everyone. So if you haven't spoken yet, please feel free or not.
Also, the idea of these that I don't think was mentioned is that they're punched metal with a architectural lighting feature so that the pattern would glow, and we can look at a variety of patterns to integrate into the face of these signs. So behind these could be 3 to 4. This one shows it a little bit more, but we were thinking it could be RGB light so that it relates to the arts district and the color palette some more.
The RGB would be great. So you could design it. I mean, you could program it then.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
No, they can't hear me.
We can hear you.
Yes, you can. Who's speaking?
I think
I think
she just
know
muted
her.
herself.
Whoever was speaking, would you like to type in your message and we can get you back online?
Well, if there's an empty space, I'll jump in a little bit. I'm just wondering, like, is using like the Binghamton green as an accent color as well, from place to place?
We thought about that. I think Clark and Branson can speak to this a little more, but that was in this for a while. But as we wanted to relate more to the industrial character of Binghamton, as the dark green can look institutional sometimes. So we wanted a more industrial tone. So that very dark, like almost black brown, was what we were going with.
I see the industrial to some degree, but what I also see when you're sitting in the middle of the city is you see the green hills surrounding the city and the number of trees there as well. And it is something that is, again, I'm not from Ithaca or Syracuse, but I'm from Binghamton. It is something that Binghamton, that green has been a color that has carried through in most of signage, our city flag, et cetera. And I'm not saying, whatever, I'm not saying to have it all things, but it as an accent piece to catch on from time to time. It is home. It's just like orange is Syracuse.
Right.
That whatever the Pantone number is, and it varies, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
But sound like bitter experience. I have the same problems. But at one point I tried to get the university and the city to merge their Pantone, but I was roundly thrown out of that one. So it will happen someday.
We are going to definitely keep thinking about the color palette and how we apply it. And, Cloud has done so many sketches. It's amazing of how these come through, but we're only at the beginning of design. Wanted to refresh everyone's memory on some of these signage options. So the wayfinding signs, again, as Branson mentioned, these are attached to existing light poles. There's a number of different styles of existing light poles in the district. So one thought was that these wayfinding signs can help to unify the district because they would all match. So we've got a few different styles that we're thinking of here.
Yeah, and each of these would relate back to the gateway because we want a cohesive graphic system. So, we're just showing you that with the concepts for the gateway elements that we can relate the wayfinding to it.
If anyone else had something to say, go ahead.
Am I on mute still?
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me, good. I do like the wraparound signs very much, and I like your DECO signs on the green grass or whatever green you have. I think you're going to find, I know for a fact, there's a lot of dog owners in these apartments, and it's quite dense with dogs. I'd hate to see it abused. Is there any thought of how to protect some of these green spaces from dogs, or in New York City, when I lived there, you used to curb your dog. Nobody curbs their dog anymore, but, and I don't know.
Humans.
Right. And I don't know if you put a dog park or a dog walk spot, but I know my tenants go straight across the street and those trees get peed on 25 times a day.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you can do about that.
A couple things. So more waste cans downtown would help for people to put their bags in. We did think about dog waste stations, but that seemed a bit too specific when, good looking big waste cans could take more than just that. But we did think about it. In terms of the plantings, it helps basically to have spaces that are a little more difficult for a dog to get into, because they will walk right onto lawn and go right to the tree because that is easiest. So something a little thicker, and there's nothing stopping private owners from putting little signs to the effect of curb your dog. We haven't, I think it's a good thing to keep thinking about as we look at the design. But there's also a balance to strike between trusting people to do the right thing. But dogs came up in the survey quite a bit.
Your dog.
No.
Right.
I like the street signs, by the way, too. They look, I think there's an interesting, they stick out and they do tie into the wayfinding. It's a great idea.
Were there any preferences that anyone had on style, or just keep going with ideas?
I like the wrap, the second one.
Yeah, I don't feel, I think they're all interesting ideas. I don't have not really bound to any one of them, to tell you the truth. But if I'm trying to think. No, I that's a bit.
We've got these different options also for the gateway fixtures. These again are kind of these larger than life elements that are at the periphery, and they have there's an in-ground light, as Barb was explaining, that could be programmed to be different colors, and that would shine through the perforated metal.
I like the first one, but they're all nice.
And the last piece that was more of this custom art signage were the screens. So these are at the median, near the State Street garage, near the Riverwalk, and they would be infill panels to a fence. It's actually the only, one of the only fences in the area on State Street. So we had a few options there as well.
I didn't understand those. Just is there a where is that? What is it? What's its function? Are they just purely art?
They're purely art.
Okay.
They are kind of announcing that you're here. They're an interesting way to infill things that have to be there anyway. Like the median right now has to be there for traffic. The fence has to be there because of the grade change. So it's a way to have fun with it and be sculptural at once.
Yeah. Okay.
Are they going to be black, or is that rust color an option?
We are thinking about that.
I sort of like the rust with the green.
And, or could they be done in form of letters, and that could be your photo, your Instagram location?
Interesting idea.
Yeah. We could do that one, maybe in a place that would be safe to do it, like near the Riverwalk. You and your bike could pose for a photo.
No one wants to see a picture of me, let me assure you. Well,
I think those are, the idea is that these islands, it's sort of the gateway concept starts and leads you into the district. And we're thinking that we could implement them in a few places. I think they're very, they need to relate to the gateway in some way. So the pattern or the shape, this one was a little bit more of a wave, along Water Street. I mean, State Street where the canal is. And we have a Water Street, which you might think was the canal, but it was named State Street because they gave the city of Binghamton money to fill in the canal. And so they named it State Street for that reason.
I think it's also about trying to kind of blur the line. I mean, one of the things I think that came up through like talking to the members of the public was like it's very difficult to kind of try and define edges in kind of a city fabric. It's kind of about extending and blurring the boundary.
Right. Like the street names already exist, and there's no convincing people that it's State Street. So yeah, that is exactly part of why we're thinking about the names. So we've been together for a little about an hour and a half. I think we might wrap up the meeting. As we mentioned, the recording and the slideshow will be available online. So you'll be able to see and pause the video and study things in more detail and share it with your friends who aren't here tonight. Thanks everyone for coming, for sharing your thoughts with us, and keep in touch. We've got my email here, and we'll continue to update the public as the project moves forward. So thanks everybody.
Hey,
Good
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Nice to see you all.
And